Hi, my name is Peggy McKee, and I am a career coach and the CEO of Career Confidential, which is one of the hottest online job tool websites available to candidates today. I'm also a medical sales recruiter, and I recruit for my own firm, PHC Consulting. I've coached thousands of job candidates through their own job interviews, and today, it's your turn. I'm very excited to present to you the Strategic Approach to Interviewing webinar. Now, I've asked my good friend Carl Chapman to join me. Carl has years of experience both recruiting and coaching candidates through the interview process. Together, we will want to walk you through the steps you need to take in order to be successful and to get the job offer. Welcome, Carl.
Hi, Peggy.
Thank you so much for joining us for this special session, because truly, these candidates are not in the interview for any other reason other than to get the job offer. They're here to learn about the opportunity and to get an offer so that they have decisions to make. We're going to show you, the candidate, how to control the process by approaching the interview with a strategy to win.
So today's agenda will be to speak with you about how to be strategic in your interview so you can get the desired outcome, which is the next step or the next piece in the interview, in order to get the final piece, which is ultimately to get you the job offer.
That's right. Now, the first step in interview success, and to really succeed at anything at all, is to know exactly what you're looking to accomplish in the meeting that you're about to have. What is your goal? Ultimately, if we have a goal, we are much more likely, by more than 50%, to be successful if we know what the goal is before we move into the process. And this applies to the interview as well.
Let's think about this. In terms of your interview, your goal is always to get to the next step in the process, right? So if we're in the phone interview, your goal is to get to the face-to-face, right, Peggy?
That's right. And if you're in the face-to-face interview, your goal is to get to the final interview or the second interview. And if you're in the final interview, your goal is to get the offer. You don't have any other goals. These are the only goals, because if you don't move through the cycle or the process, there will be no job offer and you will have no decision to make. So that's why it's important to understand what your goals are. Now, how are you going to reach your goal? Well, by executing your mission.
And your mission is to prove to the hiring manager that you, number one, understand the job. Number two, can do the job. Number three, that you will do the job. And number four, you do not pose a risk to his or her continued employment.
Right. A lot of people don't understand this. They come into the interview and basically the hiring manager asks them a number of questions. And they answer those, and then when they get to the point where the hiring manager so graciously says, "Do you have any questions?" they spout off their obligatory 5 or 6 written questions that they've come up with. Now that's not strategy, and that's not controlling the interview. And to be honest, I can remember being this person as well. But what I've found as I've gone through the recruiting process and as I've watched many successful candidates over the years is that in order to accomplish your mission and reach your goal, you have to understand what your role is in the interview. And your role is to sell yourself.
Now, Peggy and I talk a lot about the job search as being a sales process. You are the product, and the hiring manager is the buyer. You have to think about, if you're going to sell yourself to the hiring manager, what benefits do you offer the hiring manager? Why should he buy you or, basically hire you over the other candidates?
Mm-hmm.
To answer these questions, well, you have to understand the hiring manager's needs. What are his goals? What's he looking for? How do you gain that knowledge to have the best interview possible?
Well, the first thing you need to do is over-prepare for the interview. Know as much as you can about the job, the company, the person who's going to interview you. Anything you can learn about these things will help you be more successful in the role and help you be more successful in the interview. So be over-prepared. This is a common characteristic of successful candidates in today's job market. If you want to compete and win, you're going to have to match what others are doing and do it better.
So you need to understand the job. What are the responsibilities or the goals that you're responsible for in that position? What are the problems that you can solve?
Now this is where the strategy comes into play, because you need to have asked when you were first contacted by the third-party recruiter or the internal recruiter, What are the responsibilities of the job? Not just what is the job description or send me the job description. Ask them to verbalize it. A lot of candidates lean on the job description, and that's not the best place to get the information. Of course, it has the keywords and things like what you're going to be responsible from day to day, and certain pieces in there that you wouldn't get if you just asked this person about this. But you need to clarify that indeed the job is what the job description describes, because companies get busy and they don't overhaul their descriptions, and duties and things that have to be done within the job can change over time. So you've got to ask about the job.
Peggy, I've even seen companies where the job description was more or less an HR exercise and had nothing whatsoever to do with the job that I was actually recruiting for.
Right, or what the hiring manager really wants to have happen.
Yeah, because in fact, when I shared with him what the job description was, he said, "That's not what I'm looking for."
And I've got companies that have the same issue. Their job descriptions are old or have changed, or little bitty things that make a big difference in the company change every year, and yet they don't update or overhaul their job descriptions. So you just can't lean on that job description. Your objective here is to find out what are the qualities and the characteristics that are important to the hiring manager. What are they looking for? Do your preliminary research with the recruiter to find out as much as you can, and then you can ask your remaining questions in the interview. What are the problems that you can solve, like Carl said? What are the greatest challenges of the particular role? What happened to the last person in this role? Why are they no longer with the company? Where did they go? Were they promoted? How long did it take till they were promoted? How well did they do in the job? If you could replicate the last person who had the job and clone them, would you hire them again? And what were they like? Because these things are going to tell you critical pieces that you can speak to later in the interview process. Right, Carl?
Right. And if you happen to be interviewing for a job where there are multiple people in the organization doing the same job, then you might ask, of the people you have working for you currently, what would you say are the characteristics of the most successful person? Because, if you ask what characteristics those are, then you've got a blueprint of what you need to communicate during the interview so that they'll think you're that person, right?
That's absolutely right. For instance, if they say the person is extremely flexible and able to travel, well, these kinds of things, then you need to know about how you will talk about flexibility and how you're able to travel and how there aren't any reasons or responsibilities that would stop you from meeting those necessary deeds of the job. Now, have you done this in the past? How have you done it in the past? You show them you're completely comfortable with it. You need to set their mind at ease. Once you find out what their ideal candidate looks like, you can build your case around this. So you want to get this information from the recruiter, that's ideal, and in the interview, second best but still workable. Again, this is your blueprint for going further.
Peggy, what should we think or consider about the company itself?
Well, I would look at what's their mission, what are their goals, what are their strengths, what are their issues, what's in the press, who are the competitors that are chomping at the bit, who are the competitors that are close to them, and how is it that they need to differentiate themselves from those competitors, and how does that fit within your job responsibilities? Ultimately, what the company wants is someone that can either increase profits or decrease costs. If you do one of these two things, it all ends up in a positive financial state that the company's looking for. Now think about this. I once had a candidate who went in for her first interview in a specialized medical sales position with a list of physicians from the field that were in her state with a check mark by the ones that she knew. And that was very impressive. What really put icing on the cake was when she went back for her second interview and she'd highlighted 25 names on this same list, okay, that she'd contacted in the last week to find out what product they were using that was similar to the company that was hiring.
Wow.
And what they liked about it, what they didn't like about
Wow.
it. The hiring manager was blown away, and he took her right in to see the CEO, and of course she got the job.
That's totally understandable. I probably would have hired her on the spot too.
Absolutely.
Now, that's a very specific example, but the bigger picture here is that going the extra mile before you're hired, during your preparation, and all the effort for the interview can pay off really big.
Big time. That's right. So we need to know who the interviewer is too. So do background on the interviewer. You can look him up on LinkedIn. You can look him up on Spoke or Plaxo or Facebook or anywhere. Google him. Look at his backgrounds and his experiences and think about how those may mold his attitude and adjustments. No, I'm saying his. Could have been hers too, right? Think about how these experiences might make him or her think more positively because of your experience or think less of you because of your experience. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in our industry, we deal with a lot of folks who are in pharmaceutical and they want to make the transition into medical device. Well, if you're interviewing with a manager who has a background in pharmaceutical sales and he's in a medical device job, well, then your pharmaceutical background is common ground and it's probably pretty positive for you.
Right.
On the other side of the coin, let's say you're interviewing with someone who has a med device background and you come from a pharma background, that may mean that you've got a bigger hill to climb. So then the next thing you might look at is, who are the people that already report to this person on his team? Has he ever hired anybody from a pharma background or from your background, or does he lean toward those other backgrounds? It's going to help you be more prepared for the interview.
Yeah, there's so much information and so many ways to look at this that will really help you prepare for the interview. Not just where did he go to college or what is his degree, but what are his experiences, and we could say hers.
Right.
And how might those form his or her prejudices or biases. Now, how do you find this information, Peggy?
Well, another way to find the information is go back to that third-party recruiter if you're working through one of those guys. I'm surprised more candidates don't ask me for information about my companies. Questions like, how long have you recruited for this company? How well do you know this manager? Have you ever placed anybody with this manager before? Have you ever placed anybody with this company before? Who have they hired for this kind of position in the past? What was their backgrounds?
Questions like, in the past, when you placed someone there, what was it that made the person successful in getting that offer? What advice can you give me? What should I prepare for in the interview? Do you have any materials that you can share with me?
These are tremendous questions to ask a third-party recruiter working with you, but remember, a third-party recruiter is a recruiter that doesn't work for the company. They're independent. That's different from an internal recruiter who works directly within the company and only recruits for jobs within that company.
Yeah, let's say that an internal recruiter calls you. That's a recruiter in HR that works directly for the company.
Gets their paycheck from that same
exactly
company, right?
Not working for a fee, but they're on a salary.
That's right.
And their boss has said, or the hiring manager has said, we need this kind of person.
Right.
So you might ask them, do you have some specific papers that I need to look at? Or are there some specific websites that you would encourage me to review? Is there a specific product page that I should be looking at?
Right. Or, have you worked with this particular hiring manager in the past? What kinds of profiles have they liked in the past? Who else have you helped with this? What advice would you give me? Now, they may not give you any advice, but if you don't ask, they're definitely not going to give it to you. You've got to ask. Now, how do you find other information? Again, you can ask the recruiter these questions since the recruiter is going to be very familiar with the industry.
Now, but you can also find out a lot online. You can Google the company. You can Google the products. You can Google the competitor. You can Google press releases and blog articles and customer comments. You can even Google the hiring manager.
That's right. And LinkedIn is a gold mine for this kind of research. You can go to the company page. You can look at individual pages of past and present employees. You might be able to get a feel for similar characteristics of current employees and how you fit. You can also see who maybe worked for this manager in the past, and you can call them and ask for a really, really honest opinion about the company and the manager. You might even be able to look at the manager's individual profile there. There's a lot of information on the internet to help you prepare for interviews in terms of getting to know the company and the hiring manager. It's a lot of work, but the results are going to be worth. Walk into that interview as a knowledgeable candidate. It will set you apart as you go through the interview process. You just have to search it out.
Now, I just have to tell you, there is no way that your competitors are doing this stuff unless they're listening to the same training
webinar. Right.
Okay, and it's unbelievably impressive when someone comes to a interview that's that well prepared. You're going to see a difference as soon as you start putting those tactics into place, right?
Absolutely. Even the response from the manager will be warmer.
You know what? I'm getting goosebumps right now. You can attest to that,
it's
right?
It's true, though. It's absolutely true. Even the manager will be warmer to you because he'll see your preparation, how serious you are, how focused you are, and how you really want the opportunity and you're willing to put forth the effort to get it.
Right. And you're not even on the paycheck.
That's right.
Or payroll with no paycheck.
That's
and
right.
Maybe not any in sight. But that's okay. You're doing above and beyond. Peggy, let's talk about phone interviews.
Well, the first move in most interview processes is the phone interview, and I love them. But what you have to understand about phone interviews are they're a screening process. They're just like if you're seining for fish. They're trying to weed out the candidates and narrow down to a list of people that they plan to bring for that face-to-face interview. So remember, we talked about goals. The goal of the phone interview is to get to the face-to-face interview. And the best way to do this is to excel in the phone interview. And what's really cool here is you can cheat. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, at the phone interview, you can have notes, your resume, keywords, key questions, all of these in front of you, spread out so that you can see them, refer to them, even take notes.
You know, I used to tell my candidates they should make a little command cockpit, right? Have those things set strategically about their their desk so they know where to, when a question comes up, they know how to refer exactly to the right reference material. Because guess what, guys? We're not using video phones yet.
Not yet.
And no
That's
one can
coming.
tell you're cheating.
That's right. And you can't always have these things in front of you in a face-to-face interview, but in the phone interview, there's no excuse not to use these tools to make yourself successful. Now, there's a few other things that you can do as well to make certain that you have a great phone interview. You need to make sure you're very calm, you have a quiet spot to talk, you want to be able to completely focus on the call, have no interruptions, all right? You can have your resume and your list of questions, maybe even check them off as you ask them. I want you to consider standing up, okay? Because when you stand up, you have a stronger vocal presence and you have more energy in your phone conversation. Smiling while you talk also communicates through the phone line. Another tip is to have a mirror that you're looking at as you deliver the phone interview and go through the phone interview, because then you'll respond to yourself. It's as if you're having a conversation. You can smile. You'll hear the smile through the phone call. I mean, these are all tips and techniques to make you stronger, to get you where? From the phone interview to the face-to-face interview.
Okay, Peggy. Tell us what you don't want to do in the phone interview.
That's right. Now, these are big. Don't accept the phone interview if you can't have enough time or if you can't guarantee a quiet spot. This will leave a negative impression and you won't be able to control how loud things are around you, or if you have to go because of the time's up, it will leave a negative impression. It will stop you from going from the phone interview to the face-to-face. So control this. All right? What do I mean by control? If they call and it's not a good time, you need to say, hey, Patrick, I'd love to talk to you. I'm super excited about speaking with you about this job. But at this point, I'm about to go into an appointment. Can I call you back in an hour when I'm someplace where it's quiet and I can take the time to speak with you? Now, let's say that Patrick says, hey, I'm sorry, I'm scheduled for the rest of the day. Then you say, great, I understand that. What about tomorrow? Is there time tomorrow morning that we can schedule? I want to make sure that I'm able to give you my full attention and that it's quiet enough that you can hear me. It's really critical that you make sure you have the time and concentration for this interview, even if you have to reschedule it.
Also, make sure that you're not using filters like and or you know, and these things that stand out in phone inters.
There you go. I found
okay,
interviews.
see there, I did that on purpose, but you know, it's really annoying. It's more distracting than you probably think it is, and it gives the impression that you're not on the top of your game.
That's right. So don't answer questions also with yes or no. You need to answer with yes and some clarification, or yes and some expansion, or yes and would you like me to tell you a little bit more about it. If you only answer yes or no, then it stops, closes the discussion, and doesn't allow you to highlight your experiences and convince the interviewer that you should move to the next step. Now,
Peggy, I just thought of 3 critical things
What?
that I want to inject here.
Okay.
Because I think that we might have left them out of here.
Okay.
And they're small things that people don't normally think about, but they really should be thinking about that.
What are they?
Now, I know that there's some people in our audience who are on this training who smoke, and they think that because smoking doesn't make a sound, that the interviewer can't tell that they're smoking, and they are wrong. And I can promise you, when I'm interviewing somebody on the telephone, I can tell when they're smoking.
Okay, so that's
And
a big no-no.
You should never, ever, ever, ever do that.
Okay.
Also, drinking water is a good thing because it keeps your throat lubricated.
Absolutely.
However, don't drink water with ice in it.
Oh, yeah.
Because your glass is going to tinkle. And you know what it sounds like? It sounds like a cocktail.
Yes.
That person is going to think that you're an alky. So please don't do that. It's just
Right.
It's
So just have a
great.
glass of water, no
Absolutely.
ice.
And the third thing is, if you happen to be out of work and you know you're taking an interview at home, make sure that everyone in your house knows that you are doing an interview from X time to X time, and that you have spouse, children, dogs, pets, anything else, phones on D&D, cell phone on D&D. You don't want anything to interrupt you, because interruptions during your thought process can be very stressful. It can throw you off your game. It can also make you look disrespectful. So those are three critical things that I want everyone in the audience not to do.
Oh, right. And don't take another call. I mean, I have to tell you, I've had candidates that do that to me, and it's disrespectful. And when I call candidates, even if I'm just calling them to screen, I don't pick up another call from anyone ever. I don't care if I'm talking to the guy about my laundry service
And
or something.
you shouldn't.
because it's just disrespectful, and you can't handle that well enough to continue a positive a view of you. So just do not take another phone call during that interview,
Right.
okay? So last thing, don't ramble. It's just as bad to talk too much as it is to talk too little. So you don't want to lose focus, and don't get off message. Now, you need to know about these warnings with phone interviews. Know that they're looking for an excuse to weed you out, so don't give them one.
Oh, you know what?
What?
I don't think that we stress the fact that no one's going to hire you in the phone interview.
Well, we said you had to get to the face-to-face.
Yeah,
that
but
was
they
your
don't
only goal.
They don't understand that this is just a weeding
It
out.
really is. It's just a screen.
There's nothing that's positive about it.
Nobody offers a job after a phone interview.
That's right.
You're
And
absolutely
nobody
right.
says this is the greatest candidate that I've ever talked to. We have to get them in here and make them an offer.
Right. They say we need to see them face-to-face.
Correct.
That's right. So just to go back, make sure you rely on your voice to project enthusiasm. So if you're someone who's low key, you need to think about drinking a little bit more caffeine, or being a little more communicative or excited or enthusiastic with your voice, because it will make a difference on how you're perceived. Make sure your answers are both descriptive and succinct. This means give more than yes or no answers, but don't talk so much that you dominate the conversation and fail to get the feedback from the interviewer. It is a conversation. You must do well in this phone interview to get to the face-to-face, like what Carl said. And I know that seems intimidating, but if you control your environment, prepare for the interview the way we've told you, have these materials in front of you, you're going to do really well.
Now, face-to-face interviews are really nerve-wracking times for candidates and job seekers. For you guys, Peggy and I call them candidates.
Right.
That's because it's very personal. It can seem like a rejection if someone doesn't want to move forward with you. It's a little bit like dating in that respect.
It is.
You're asking somebody out, and you didn't have a good time, and you never hear back from them.
Right.
So being judged on a lot of things, and one more thing is you're going to be judged on is your presence in the interview.
That's right. So you've got to start strong. Your interview attire needs to be conservative but stylish. This is not the time to trot out the new clothing or some really big earrings or some really strong cologne.
Okay, Peggy, I don't wear earrings, so
Okay.
I've got that
So
marked on my list.
Boom, we're done there. Okay, wear something that you're comfortable in so that you're not fidgeting with your clothing. And your body language needs to be honest, open, friendly, and confident. This means smile, lean forward, make eye contact, but don't stare, and make sure your handshake is really firm.
And you've got to avoid that same weak speech problem that you might have in the phone interview. The ums and the ahs and the uhs. And you've also got to eliminate the I hope and the try and with luck. You have to say positive things that show that you're a person of action, not someone that things happen to, right?
Right.
You want to project confidence that way, and you want your appearance to be something that they'll be comfortable with seeing you in that role.
Right. Tame those nervous habits. Think about what you do when you're nervous. Ask others around you what you do when you're nervous, and then be aware of those things and have the same types of conversations with yourself about how you'll stop those and not do them in the interview. Now, to help you control some of those nervous habits, do deep breathing exercises before your interview so that you're calm, and arrive early enough that you have plenty of time.
Okay. Now, when you come to the face-to-face interview, a lot of people will just show up with a resume. And in the past, that was probably enough. But now, you're going to need to bring a resume plus. Plus a historical look at what you've done, plus a future look at what you'll do. Right, Peggy?
That's absolutely correct. I had a candidate the other day show up for a $150,000 job, and all he brought was his resume. And the manager dismissed him right there. He said, if this person doesn't understand that I need to see evidence of his success in the past or some evidence of what he's going to do moving forward, I just don't think he's worthy of my position, nor do I think he's prepared for it. And I think the manager's right. So you've got to understand how these things really do reflect upon you and your candidacy for the job.
Okay, Peggy, let's quickly cover the resume. First, bring enough copies for everyone. Your resume needs to be 1 or 2 pages at the most, right?
That's right.
It should be easy to read and error-free. It needs to have a well-written objective statement, and it needs to have your accomplishments quantified.
Boy, that's a big one right there. I'm talking about numbers, dollars, and percentages. This is especially easy for sales roles, but I don't care what your job is, you need to be able to quantify your successes so managers can see how you can produce quantifiable results in their position. Ultimately, when he sees that you've done X dollars of savings or X dollars of profits or whatever it is, he's going to think that that's probably what you can do for him as well. Now, what does Carl mean by a historical look at what you've done? Well, this is what a lot of people know as a brag book. It will have documentation of how well you've done in your previous roles. It should have performance reviews. It could have rankings. It could have attaboy emails or notes that range from award notifications to emails about happy clients or customers or a process that went really well. It could have a list of continuing education or training that you've completed. It could have some proposals in it that you've put together. It could have a list of the kinds of clients you've worked with or the kinds of software that you've worked with or the kinds of, accounting systems that you're familiar with. I mean, there's so many different things that you can put in this book that's going to show evidence as to your success in the past. And it works for salespeople. It works for engineers. It works for teachers. It works for any professional. What you'll put in it depends on your particular profession, your experiences, but the end result is a collection of the proof that you can deliver results. Now, the brag book is not just proof of the success. It's a platform for a conversation. You're going to look through it with your interviewer, talking about the pieces that are particularly relevant to the job. Okay, I had one candidate who had a massive brag book. I mean, it was 3 inches thick. So she highlighted like the top 5 or 10 pages or the sections that she really wanted to hit upon. And it implied that there was so much that she could do well that there wasn't enough time to talk about it all. It was extremely effective. Okay, so the brag book shows that you've been successful before, what you've been successful in, and that you can be successful in the future.
But whatever you do, don't leave it with the interviewer. If you can't work it in your interview, the likelihood that they'll look at it after you're gone is very, very slim. Right, Peggy?
That's right.
So tell us about how to demonstrate what you will do in the job if you were to be hired.
Well, this is a forward-looking document that you need to do. We call it a 30, 60, 90-day action plan. This plan will help you outline to the manager, to the interviewer, what you'll do in the first 3 months of your job. Now, you can change those time frames. If you need it to be a 6-month plan or a 12-month plan, you can do that. But what it really does is solidifies the opportunities for you because it allows you to shine and show your skills in a way that the typical ping-pong interview questions just don't allow you to do. It shows strategic thinking about the position, high-level thinking that will be very impressive to a hiring manager. It shows that you care very much about doing a good job. It helps the hiring manager see through with him what your life will look like in this role. It shows that you've already done the homework, you've customized the plan as much as you can to the particular company structure, mission, the job, the description, the challenges, and this kind of plan is adaptable for any job in any industry. Every job has a portion of time where you'll be getting your bearings, learning the ropes, taking initiative to contribute to the organization's goals, right, Carl?
Right.
So you need this 30, 60, 90-day action plan to show them exactly what you'll do in that role, and this will set you apart from other candidates that won't bring the plan.
Okay, Peggy, here comes a setup question for you. Do managers ask for this in an interview?
Some actually do, but most don't. So you will need to maximize your opportunity to get this offer, and to do that, you need to present this tool. This tool will allow you to discuss the job and your fit in a way that nothing else will, okay? So when you hear those questions like, how would you approach the job? Or what would you do in the first month? Or how would you determine what you're going to prioritize in the role? Or how do you see this job working? That's when you have your opening. That's when you say, I'm so glad you asked. I've put together a strategy for success. I've done a lot of research and I'm confident I can do the job. So I put together a plan about how I would approach it. And it works for both the very experienced job candidate and the fresh out of school candidate, because the experienced candidate will be able to show his or her extensive background that will help them create an effective strategic plan of action. But the rookie will be able to talk about how extensively they've researched the job and thought about the job, which will give them a huge leg up over all other entry-level candidates who haven't.
Okay, candidates who aren't familiar with this type of plan usually have some questions about it, and I want to try to address some of those here, Peggy.
Okay.
What if you don't have a chance to present the plan in your interview?
Well, first, even if you couldn't present the plan, it would not be a waste of your time, because the exercise itself helped you prepare for the interview more completely than you could have without creating the plan. Okay? Second, all is not lost. You might want to consider sending it as evidence after the interview to show them how prepared you were, or to use it as talking points in a phone conversation. You could say something like, based on our discussion, here's how I could really see myself contributing to the organization, and I'd like to meet with you to talk about this again. This might get you another interview or more time with the manager, which ultimately leads to job offers.
Okay, Peggy, here's another setup question, because we do this all the time.
That's right.
Peggy, what if my plan isn't correct?
Well, here's a
newsflash, right?
Newsflash. You're going to have parts of your plan that won't be correct because you haven't worked at this company doing this job before in this environment. Even if you had the job 10 years ago, it'll be different today because the environment's different. This holds a lot of people back, and they don't even prepare the plan because they can't get past this one piece, because they're scared the manager will say, "What? I'm sorry, your plan is wrong. We don't have 2 weeks of training. We have 3 weeks of training."
Oh, no.
Yeah, or
they're not going to hire me because I missed the number of weeks of training.
And so your answer there would be, hey, I knew this plan wouldn't be completely accurate or correct because obviously, Mr. Manager, I've not done this job before or worked for you. And that's why I wanted to go over it with you and correct those parts that aren't correct and get it back to you so that you can see my absolute commitment to doing what I need to do to be successful in the first 90 days of my role. You see, it's not a negative for the plan to have a few flaws. It's an opportunity for another conversation. A slightly flawed plan that can be fine-tuned is much better than no plan at all. The bottom line is, create this kind of plan, use it as a tool in the discussion of the interview, and it'll absolutely contribute to your ability to stand out over all other candidates. Now, strategically, you need to be prepared for those typical interview questions, and Carl and I want to go through a few of those right now.
Okay, the first typical interview question, and it's the one that most people dread, is usually, tell me a little bit about yourself.
That's right. It's so open-ended. Some candidates see this as an opportunity to talk about everything since birth, and that is just not going to represent you the best way. This is also not the time to start talking about where you're from or what your hobbies are or how many kids you have.
What interviewers really mean when they say, tell me about yourself, is tell me about the things that will make a difference to me as I consider your candidacy for this job. So you might start with your education, something like, I have an undergraduate degree in blah, blah, blah. If you're a recent graduate, you can include your GPA. Then you want to hit the high points, the promotions, the big achievements, the major skills. But you need to be able to do all that very succinctly and quickly. The job interview is a situation where you're trying to provide information that allows this person to actually see you in a particular role and then make you an offer based on their projection of you in that place.
Right.
So the entire message needs to be, I can achieve, I can do, I've done it before, and I'll do it for you. It's a very targeted message that's going to help you get what you want, which is the job offer. Here's another typical interview question. What's your greatest weakness?
I hate that question. It comes up all the time, and your answer really is critical. And you can't just stumble over it like you've never heard it before, because we all have. You've got to prepare for this one. Some people say that you should come up with a real weakness that you've taken steps to overcome, the argument being that it shows growth. And we don't think that's a great idea. It's never a good idea for an interviewer to hear something like, my weakness is organizational skills. That's not good. Or some other issue that could affect, or they would perceive could affect, your productivity on the job. But you also don't want to say something like, I just work too hard. That's a cliche, and it won't get taken seriously, and it might even damage the hiring manager's attitude toward you. So it's a good idea to give a real weakness, but one that contributes to your success in the job. For instance, my weakness is impatience. It's a weakness that's gotten me into trouble before, but on the other hand, it drives me to succeed faster and to do things faster than most folks, or to dive into a project, or to get something done. So it does drive my success, even though it is a weakness.
So try to come up with real weaknesses that also benefit your performance on the job.
That's right.
Here's one more very common interview question. Why should we hire you?
Well, this is a great time to point out your track record of achievements, possibly with your brag book, or how you'll be able to achieve them for them. It's also a great time to introduce your 30, 60, 90-day action plan that outlines that you've thought about the job and have a plan to successfully dive into it. But sometimes it's more like, you don't have the experience, so why should we hire you? If it's this experience issue, remember, they weren't birthed in this industry. Okay, someone gave them a chance. No one has the experience before they get the experience. It might be good to remind them of that. So you might say something like, well, at one point, Mr. Hiring Manager, you were new and had no experience, and obviously you've been very successful. Would you hire you again? Okay, so you're putting them in your shoes, and they should be nodding by then and thinking that they would hire themselves, so why not you? And it gives you a psychological edge.
You can also remind them of someone else that they've hired who had no experience in their particular industry. You say something like, have you ever hired someone who had no specific experience in this area? And then wait for their answer. Most of the time they'll agree, yeah, I've hired somebody that didn't have experience. Mm-hmm. Then you say, I'm sure there were times when it didn't work out, but there must have been at least a few times when there was a success there, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
And they'll start thinking about those successes and maybe even telling you about a time they hired, say, Randy, who had no experience but turned out to be amazing. So you say, great, I can be your Randy. I'm amazing at what I do, and I can take these skills and apply them here to be successful for you in this role.
Right. You're just helping them to remember that they weren't always where they are, and there are times when the right person works out great, even if they have no experience. Now, another big topic is talking about money in the interview, and it's a big no-no. You don't bring up money in the interview ever.
All you talk about in the interview is what they need, what solutions they need, what problems they have, who's been able to fix it before, and how you'll be able to fix it.
That's right. Don't talk about money in the interview. You don't have anything to talk about until they make you an offer. A lot of people worry about this so much, but you don't need to. If they bring up money, you say, are you making me an offer? With a smile on your face.
Or a big smile, right?
A big smile, right? Or you can deflect by saying, hey, I'm looking for a great opportunity. I'm sure that you'll offer a fair salary given the responsibilities of the job. You just can't speak about money yet. You have to sell, and sell yourself all the way to the end. And when they make an offer, then you can talk about the money with them. just not until that time. Don't ask about salary or bonuses or anything. Once you get the offer, you can discuss all of that very pointedly and in great detail, but not until then. If you do it before then, you could damage yourself as your candidate.
Okay, Peggy, one of the main questions we get from candidates is, what's the most important thing I can do to set myself apart from other candidates?
The answer is ask questions.
Okay, why is asking questions so important?
Well, it turns the interview into a conversation. It makes it a much nicer environment to be in. It's no longer just a ping pong back and forth game where they ask a question, you answer it, they ask a question, you answer it. It gives you better answers to the interview questions. The feedback you get from your questions will help you tailor your answers to their questions, all right? So what are they most interested in? Remember how we were talking about all the information that you want to know about the job? Mm-hmm. These are the kinds of questions. What has been the greatest, challenge in this role? What has brought you to this place where you need someone like myself as a solution? Tell me about those things, okay? In the end, it will help you make the decision about whether you'll take the job or not too, because an interview is more than just your audition for the job. You're also trying to see if the company will be a good place to spend the majority of your waking hours. You want to know if it's going to benefit your long-term career plans. And possibly the best reason of all to ask questions is you can uncover any doubts that the hiring manager might have about you so that you can address them while you have a chance.
Okay, what questions should you ask?
Well, one of the first questions is, and we talked about this before, but what are you looking for in the position? Now, we talked about this in preparing for the job interview, but I'm telling you it's a question you ask in the interview. What are you looking for in this position? What does your ideal candidate look like? Or something along those lines. Hopefully, you've been able to do some of the background with your recruiter, but it's still a great idea to ask this in the interview. Uncovering what they really want and what really highlights the parts of the experience, your experience, that they'll be most interested in and that you need to do a good job of showcasing. You won't waste time talking about things that they don't care about. Okay?
Right.
You can also get to the information of asking about the last person they hired. Were they successful? What made them successful? Did they get promoted? Where are they now? What are their major obstacles to success in this role? The answers to these questions are going to give you tremendous insight into the job. What tasks in this job will define success? That's another way of finding out what they want. How will they judge performance? Once you get this information, you can target your message to how you'll be able to use your skill sets to give them what they want and need in this role.
Another vital reason to ask questions is so that you can close the interview for the job, right? I mean, remember, what we told you about the job search, it's a sales process. And part of the sales process is asking for the order, asking for the sale. In this case, in the job search, it's asking for the job.
Right. And, this is so hard for some candidates because you're pushing for an answer and it feels really uncomfortable, especially if you've never been in sales, which most of our audience, 90% of our audience, is not in a sales role. They are in engineering roles and teaching roles and training roles, not sales, right? So it's really uncomfortable, but I am promising you this is the best thing that you can do to increase your odds in the interview. First of all, you've got to find out if you've done the job of convincing them to move you to the next step, or if we're in the final interview, to move you to the offer. You need to find out where you stand. Also, hiring managers expect to see some assertiveness and enthusiasm on your part, and this is one way to communicate that. So how do you do this? Well, you wait till the discussion is winding down and you say something like, hey, I really appreciated your time today. I'm super excited about the opportunity. I see my skill sets as a natural for this position and I'm ready to move forward. Do you agree that I'll be wildly successful in this role? Or can you see me as being a productive member of your team? Or you could ask, do you see any reason why I wouldn't be a good fit for the job? Now, these are hard questions to ask, and you can modify them a bit, but it's important for you to ask them. Now, I want to interject here. If the question that you ask doesn't end in a question mark and doesn't require the manager to answer you, you're not closing. And I want to stress that. So if you're not truly asking him to respond to you, you're not closing. And because of that, you are limiting yourself to your success, okay? because we know, we've experienced through our candidates, through all of our years of recruiting, that asking these simple questions, will you move forward? Are you going to present me to your CEO? Will you make me an offer? Will you see me in the final interview? Whatever that next step is, we know that it will increase your odds at success by more than 30 to 50% just by using these closing lines. So the question that I get from candidates is, what if they say no? It feels so personal. It feels so pushy. It feels so scary. But guess what? It's personal either way. You need this job or you wouldn't be here. If you're perfect for the job, it's worth getting out of your comfort zone and asking for it. Remember, you're trying to get to your goal, which is the next step, and you're trying to uncover any reason that the hiring manager might say no. Sometimes it's a legitimate obstacle that will keep you from the offer, but sometimes it's a matter of a misunderstanding.
The hiring manager might think you have no experience in a particular skill that's important to him, and you just hadn't talked about it yet.
That's right.
Or he might think that you don't want to move when in fact you're completely open to it. In fact, I know sometimes managers think you don't want to move when the whole reason that you're talking to them is because they have a job in exactly the spot where you want to move
That's
to.
right. That's right.
So it could be any kind of thing that's a misunderstanding. But uncovering that objection while you can answer it during the interview is the key to saving the offer.
That's right. Now, a lower key way of closing is to ask, what are the next steps? All right? You'll either get a very positive, definite plan for moving forward, or you'll pick up on the uncertainty that you'll hopefully be able to counter by saying, is there any reason why we wouldn't move forward? Or,
well, what I was going to say, Peggy, this is really the weenie way out. I don't want our people using this method because the reason that the first stuff that we talked about is so effective is because it is the hard question.
It is the hard question.
It really will set people apart. What they're doing in this, what are the next, now they should know what the next steps are, and it's okay.
Right.
But I want them to go from what are the next steps back to that hard
Will
hard
you
close.
move me forward to that
Exactly.
next step?
Exactly.
When can I expect to meet with that next person? When can I expect to have that next phone interview? When can I, what can I expect? When can I expect? Ask questions where the manager has to answer you and find out exactly where they're at before you leave that interview, okay? It's a terrible feeling to get out of the interview and not know when you'll get an answer about whether or not you're moving forward in the process. Don't let this happen to you. An important thing to remember is that when you ask one of these critical questions, wait. Just be quiet for a moment and see what they say. Sometimes the response will be something you can counter, and sometimes the answer will be no. But if you want the job, you need to ask. Managers know that this line of questioning is difficult for you. They know it takes a lot of courage for you to ask, and they also know that you must practice it and have strong communication skills in order to do this in the interview. But it's worth it. Candidates who step out and ask for the next step are rewarded for it every day.
Peggy, what do you do if you get a direct objection from the interviewer, like, you don't have the experience we're looking for?
Well, one way to turn that around is say, I understand. I have to admit, if I were you, I'm sure I'd want to try to find someone with that experience too. Have you ever hired someone for this position who didn't have the experience? They're probably going to nod, and then you can say, well, how did they do? And if it turned out well, then you can talk about how you can be that person too, or how you can use your skills to achieve in this job. You can also talk about a time where you were hired for another role where you weren't qualified for that either, but how you overcame those obstacles and how you were the most successful member of the team within 9 to 12 months. Give them an example of when you've been able to learn something super quick and deliver on it just the way you're going to deliver for them. You can talk about your work ethic. You can talk about how you'll train yourself, the additional skills and knowledge. And I want to interject here. I had one candidate where they didn't really have a job description. They didn't have the job worked out at all. The person brought this 30, 60, 90-day plan to the interview, and the manager was so thrilled to see the training program already worked out, hired him on the spot and said, I need you to send me a copy of our training program, because it showed him how the guy would make the transition and what he would do. And he looked at it and said, okay, if you do these things, you're going to be successful. Let's get going. You're a problem solver when you do these things, right?
Right. Sometimes you'll have a hard time getting the hiring manager to agree that, yes, he does want to move you forward in the process. Sometimes they just are non-committal. They just don't want to commit, at least not verbally.
Right.
He's not saying no, but he seems to be sort of on the fence.
Okay, well, this is going to happen, and you can help them make decisions. You can say things like, what can I do to make you more comfortable moving forward with me as a candidate? If you're feeling you're having pushback from the manager who's saying something like, well, we have other candidates to interview, and after we do that, we'll make a decision, and you could say, hey, great, I understand that, but you've hired other candidates in this company for this role in the past, so I'm sure you know what looks like a successful candidate for you, and you'll know it when you see it. So based on that, do you see, regardless of the other candidates, can you see me being a productive member of the team? And then be quiet and wait for the answer. Now, maybe the interviewer will say, well, I don't have the final decision on this. Jack had me interview you so that you could get some insight into the company and I could give you some answers. And then you say, I understand that and I appreciate your time today, but I know Jack values your opinion and I know he's going to ask you what you thought of me. And so I need to know, can I count on a thumbs up from you?
Peggy, some people are going to find this a very uncomfortable process.
That's right. And there will be those who, even though they find it's uncomfortable, they will execute on it and they will reap the valuable benefits of this kind of questioning. And I'm just challenging you, if you're listening to this webinar, open your mind and listen to two recruiters who have managed thousands of candidates to successful job offers. And we're telling you, you're failing yourself if you don't do this. It might not feel comfortable to push this person into the decision, and you may push him into a no, but it's better to push him further toward the decision now while you have the opportunity to mold and shape that decision that you want than waiting and let the decision being made after your leave, okay? Another thing that you can do is ask for advice. If I am moving forward in this process, what advice would you give me? If I do get this job, what advice would you give me? What would you tell me to do that would help me be successful in this position? If you get the advice, consider that a buying signal. That's good. If you push the manager into a decision and it does turn out to be no, you can't turn it around. What can you do? Okay? You can say, I appreciate your time today and I understand it's difficult to get together like this, but I'd like to schedule time to talk with you in a couple days after I've had a chance to think about what you've said and the requirements that you have, and maybe after you've had time to interview some additional candidates, because I'd like to speak with you about this again. I think this is a possible fit for us. Now, if you're a definite no, they probably won't agree, and this one you may have to walk on past, all right? But if he's on the fence, he might give you that next conversation. And in that next conversation, with that additional research and with that new information and with his experiences with the other candidates even, he may be impressed. He may move forward at that point.
Now, you could pivot at this time and ask if the manager feels if there's another role within the company that you might be a better fit for, right?
That's right. That's right. And I've had junior candidates who interview for a job and maybe they're getting no on this particular job. And then when they pivot and use this question, the manager says, hey, you know what? You should be considered for this other role.
Right.
And because they've already met you, they'll even call, I've had this happen, have them call the other department manager and say, hey, I've got Joe here. He's interviewing for my XYZ. I'm not sure that's going to work out, but I could see him being really successful within your department. Can I send him down there and have you chat with him? That's huge, all right? So just consider the pivot if you do get to the no. So you've gotten through the questions and answers, and you've handled the objections of the hiring manager, any that he's expressed anyway, right? And now they've asked you about references. References are much more important than most candidates believe. They absolutely can make or break the job offer.
You have to have high-quality references ready to go.
That's right. And you have to be absolutely certain that these people will speak for you, and you have to know what they're going to say. When you've asked about your references, you never want to sound like you're not completely sure if they'll give you a reference, and you never want anything to come out of your mouth that sounds like, I think they'll say that I'm... You need to be... See, that's that weak language we talked about, right?
Right.
It should be, my references are going to tell you that.
Right.
My references are going to say that I am this, or I did that, or not I think they'll say, I'd hope they say... I believe they'll say. That's weak language that Carl talked about earlier. So You want to make sure that you know exactly what they're going to say about you.
Peggy, who are the best references?
You know, the best references are past supervisors and managers, but other good references can be coworkers, both past and present, sometimes clients or customers, sometimes vendors or people that work in a different department but same area that you're in or something like that. The best way to make sure that you know what your references are going to say about you is to prep them, though, Carl.
Peggy, what do you mean by that?
Well, when you've got a job interview coming up, give your references a heads up. It's like, hey, I'm up for this position and my interview is on Wednesday, so you might get a phone call. And then let them know what's important. Now, by that, what do I mean? I mean, they specifically need to focus on what they'll talk about and what they'll say about you. See, by now you've done your research on the position in the company and you know what they're looking for. So talk to your reference or coach your reference about what the company's looking for and ask them if they can target some of their remarks toward that. So if you had a specific experience in your past that you know that this new prospective employer should be interested in, remember to remind your past manager about how you did that and what it quantified out at and how he said you were this because of it. Remind him of that, coach him so that he can, guess what, be a testimonial in the sale of you as the candidate, okay? So let them know what's important, and you can absolutely remind them about your skills, your education, your accomplishment. Hey, I know this company's looking for this. I know I'd be a great experience because of X, Y, and Z. If you could work that in, I'd really appreciate it. Do you have any questions of me before you speak with them to clarify what I did for you in the past and what I'll do for you in the future? Now, don't worry about, that you're somehow stepping on the references' toes by asking them for this information. What you're actually doing is making their life easier, because if they like you, this is going to help them not have to spend time worrying about what they're going to say, okay? And it's also going to help them know exactly what you want them to communicate about you, and they don't have to worry about preparing. They know exactly what to do. So you're making their life easier. They want to support you in a successful way, and without that preparation, you don't know for sure that they will.
And you know what? Then, after you've prepped them,
that's right,
you'll never have to worry again if your reference is going to be a solid one, right?
Right. And don't forget to thank your reference and let them know how it went. Send them a note, send them a coffee card for Starbucks, take them out for coffee, whatever. Your appreciation is important there. It's also very important now that you follow up after the interview. Now, don't just assume that everything was great in the interview and wait for them to call you.
You absolutely should send a thank you email. Now, should you also send a handwritten thank you note or send one of those in place of an email?
No. Hiring decisions are often made so quickly now, no matter what they tell you, thank you notes have to be sent as soon as possible. And I mean in the first 24 hours of the meeting, all right?
Well, it has to be received.
That's right, that's right. And see, that handwritten snail mail letter just won't get there fast enough. The hiring manager may be out in Chicago for the week, interviews you on Monday, makes a decision by the hire on Thursday, gets home on Friday. He gets your letter on Friday. The game's over already, right? All right, so you've got to send your thank you note by email. If you want to send a follow-up snail mail, that's great. You cannot skip the email thank you note, okay?
Right.
Now, between the two of us, we've worked with thousands of hiring managers over the years, and we've never run into anyone that minded a thank you email, right?
Nope.
And they do appreciate the efficiency and speed with which the candidate gets back to them. If you meet with 4 people, you need to send 4 emails, and not just the same email to each one of them either.
Yeah, and don't just hit CC.
Yeah, that's right.
That won't work.
That's right. Write an original email to each person and get business cards from everyone that you meet with so you'll have those email addresses. Now, your thank you note should address how much you appreciated the opportunity to meet with them, how much you enjoyed learning about the organization, opportunity, whatever, how you know that your XYZ will help them absolutely succeed at ABC, right? And how you're looking forward to working with them further on this position.
Now, Peggy, why send a thank you note?
Well, it's polite and manners count. Hiring managers really do pay attention to things like this, and they make the connection between how you'll handle this interaction and how you'll represent the company, okay? Plus, it gets your name in front of the hiring manager one more time. And it gives you the opportunity to clarify, respond to something that was said in the interview that you didn't catch until later, or send a revised 30, 60, 90-day plan. It shows you take in information, you process it, you adapt it, you come up with something new. It shows you're thoughtful, you've thought about the position and how you'll contribute. It shows the follow-up and the communication skills that are absolute requirements in most of our professional positions today.
Okay. Now we've gone over how to handle one-on-one traditional interviews, right? The phone interview, the face-to-face.
Right.
Let's talk about the special case interview styles. These two in particular, the behavioral event interview and the panel interview, they're the most common alternative interview styles that you're likely to run into as a candidate.
That's right. That's right. Hiring managers love these behavioral event interviews. They also call these BEIs, okay? Now, why do they love them? Because they focus them on your past job behavior and performance, which is an accurate predictor of future behavior. It's very common, and it's a useful style of interviewing. In the BEI, or behavioral event interviewer, they're going to look for three things. They're going to look for content, function, and self-management. Now, what do I mean by that? Content refers to things like your education, degrees, and experiences. Function refers to your ability to deal with others and how well you communicate. Self-management refers to how you handle yourself in difficult situations, how well you operate on yourself and without management supervision. Basically, it all just means that they want to know about your background, how you've handled both typical and stressful situations in the past. Now, to determine whether or not you have the skill sets that they've identified, they're going to ask you a bunch of different kinds of theoretical questions. Typical behavioral event or interview questions include things like what if questions, like what if you were faced with X situation? How would you deal with Y situation? Leading questions like, so you're okay with high travel, is that right? And then behavioral questions, tell me about a time when you faced adversity. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with your boss.
Tell me about a time when you had an issue with a coworker.
That's right.
Tell me about your weaknesses and how they've affected your work. Tell me about your strengths and how they've affected your work.
Right. Or tell me about a time when you had to deal with an irate customer or client. What did you do?
The key to answering BEI questions is to stay calm and remember that you never change, even though the interview questions do. It's a matter of consistency. You're one package, and your job is to deliver that package in such a way that the hiring manager can see it would be a big mistake not to hire you.
That's right. The way to do this is to have stories and examples ready to go that illustrate your skills and performances in these situations. They can either be examples of what you've done in the past or an explanation of what you would do in a given situation. It's very important that you do some research on your own to discover many different kinds of behavioral event interview questions like we shared with you, in addition to the ones we shared with you, and practice telling the story that answers those questions. Now, whether or not your particular answer is based on what you did at a certain time or what would you do in a given situation, try to be reasonably detailed in your explanation. Don't just say, well, I would fix it. Walk them through the steps that you would take so that they get an accurate picture of exactly what you would do in that case. Now, whenever possible, quantify your examples. Numbers are easy for other folks to understand. It's objective, it's measurable, it gives you an accurate evaluation of your skills. Think about times you've helped the company make a profit or saved the company money or improved a process with measurable results or improved a level of accuracy, for example.
Hey, Peggy, that reminds me of a particular technique. Can you tell us about the STAR technique?
That's right. The STAR technique, if you're talking about something that happened in the past, the STAR technique can be really helpful to you. STAR stands for the S is situation, the T is task that you faced, the A is the action you took, and the R is the results you achieved. Now, if you use this framework for each one of these stories, you won't forget the vital piece that could cost you the job offer, all right? Now, when you finish your answer, ask if you've answered the question to their satisfaction, like, do you need me to elaborate? Do you need me to expand upon that? Is that the answer you were looking for? Do you have any questions about that? Clarify that you're both on the same page. Again, guess what? This is just showcasing your extreme communication skills.
Peggy, isn't clarification super important here?
Well, it is, because when you get toward the end of the interview time, you move on into closing for the job, just like you would in a traditional interview.
Okay, Peggy, let's talk about panel or group interviews.
These are really stressful for most folks. A panel or group interview basically means you've got more than one person interviewing you. They seem impersonal and judgmental, but they're very good at determining who can handle high-stress situations and still communicate clearly and represent the company, okay? It's actually less helpful for determining if someone's skill sets are appropriate for the position because the interview itself is so stressful.
So why do companies like panel interviews?
Well, they do them to save time because all of the interviews happen all at once rather than one-on-one. So think about this. I had a company that interviewed one candidate and had 7 people interviewing them last week. And so it took 7 hours to get through that whole interview process. Whereas I have another company who will put 7 people in one room and put the dude in front of them. And they're done in an hour and a half.
Wow.
And everybody sees the same candidate at the same time,
and answering
the same questions, right?
Right.
So, there's positives and negatives, and we could argue what my preference is or yours. But when they happen and when you have to be in one, remember what we're telling you, which is the panel interview, though stressful, you just handle it the exact same way you do these others, all right? Stay on track. This is another reason they like it, because it holds their interviewers accountable. They know exactly how much time. So if you find yourself in this panel interview situation, remember that your ultimate responsibility is to demonstrate those skill sets, just as we've talked about in these other interviews, and let them see what a great fit you are for the position.
You should also realize that the people on the panel probably don't want to be there either, right? They probably prefer to spend time with you one-on-one, so no one could judge their questions and responses to you.
That's right. They don't really want to be in a panel themselves, but they have to be, and you do too. So we're going to be great at it, right? So try very hard to be calm, practice relaxing breathing, and stay focused. The more prepared you are for the interviewer, the easier it'll be for you to relax and be calm. Do all of your research, just like we talked about, on the job, on the company, on the interviewer. You'll be more confident and probably look even more confident than you feel. Project that positive body image that we talked about. Lean forward, smile, eye contact, shake everyone's hand both before and after the interview. And it takes a lot of confidence to walk across the room to do this, but it leaves an extremely positive impression on the panel. So they know how hard this is to do. So do this, okay? Be sure and ask questions just like we've discussed. In the panel interview, you can ask questions too. You can still do that back and forth interaction, even though the interviewer is the entire panel, all right? Another tip I want to tell you about panel interviews is to, when you're answering someone's question, use their name if you can, to say, Carl, did I answer that question well enough? Another cheat sheet thing that you can do in a panel interview is when they all sit down, make sure you have each one of those names written down on a sheet of paper that represents them in the line that they're in. So, if Bob's the first guy on the left, then Bob, and then Jane, and then Jack, and then Sue. And that way you can keep track of who you're speaking with and use their names in the interview. It's pretty impressive.
And if you get their business cards first,
you can just put those in a row.
Spread the business cards
Absolutely.
out in a display.
Absolutely.
So make sure you ask questions for clarification. What I mean by that, is that what you mean? Mm-hmm. Make sure you're answering the questions that they're asking and answering them to their satisfaction.
Right.
And confirm that you've answered every question that they have.
Just as in every interview session and situation, I want you to ask for the next step here too, though. There's no reason you can't ask the entire panel if they can see you in the role, or if they have any objections or concerns that you need to answer in order for them to move forward.
And if you didn't collect the business cards before you start getting grilled, make sure to do it after.
That's
because
right.
You've got to have those from everyone in the room so that you can send your thank you email.
That's right, okay? So you really can approach every interview with confidence if you over-prepare for each one as we've described. Now, you've taken a giant leap today by learning the foundational steps to delivering a strategic, effective performance every time in every interview. You now understand your goals, your mission, and your role in this job search. You know what the hiring managers are really looking for, and you know how to package yourself so that you can deliver that to them. So build on what you've learned here today by identifying your top achievements and how you accomplished them, and writing that down on paper, Practice those interview questions that we covered. Incorporate those skills, achievements, successes so that your delivery is smooth. Always, always show up in the interview with your resume, brag book, and most importantly, your strategic plan for that first 30, 60, 90 days on the job.
Listen, preparation is the best remedy for nerves, and it's a surefire path to success.
Absolutely. So at this point, we're going to wish you the best of luck, but I just want you to know that if you do what we have shared with you here today in your interview, you will nail it and you will get a job offer. See you at the top.